All right. So, with AI and deepfakes, even the most tech savvy can fall victim to fraud. We saw from the example on opening night with Arlene Dickinson. Our next talk delves into the nuances of digital trust and how building a digital identity can be the key to a safer financial future for all. Here to share his insights, please join me in welcoming to the stage Vice President of Partnerships and Business Development at Interac, Giles Sutherland.
Thank you so much. It is so great to be here on the FinTech stage at Elevate. I'm going to start with a quick poll. So raise your hands. Who here knows someone who's been impacted by diabetes? Personally, friend, family member, coworker? Okay, hands down. Who here knows someone who's been impacted by a fraud or a scam? You get a call from the CRA, 407, Amazon, your bank, you name it, some text message from a mystery person. Okay, so hey, hang on, everyone, hands up still? Okay, so everyone, right? Fraud is an epidemic in Canada. It's a fact. It's familiar. I'm telling you things you already know. We know this is the case. And it's all relatable. We all know this story, and I'll give you a story of my own. It's a true story. Christmas last year, best time of the year, everyone's excited. I have these great neighbors, and their kids are the same age as mine, and they share that they're going to get their kids a puppy for Christmas, and everyone's like super excited. They go online, they're talking to the breeder. They found them on Facebook Marketplace, and like it's the perfect dog. They send the deposit. Everything is lined up so that they're going to get this puppy on Christmas Day, and they tell the kids, and everyone's like so excited. Yeah, of course, there's no puppy. Deposit's gone. Kids are crying. Everyone's heartbroken. And like, yeah, we're kind of laughing. Like, it's really sad, but it is a story, and everyone knows these stories. It's familiar. It's relatable. And it's this scenario that we all know well, which is we are interacting, buying, selling things online, and we have this assumption that whoever's on the other side is someone we can trust. Malcolm Gladwell has this thing in Talking to Strangers in his book. He describes this concept called the trust default. And the concept is that we as humans operate on a trust default because it's just too inefficient for us to wander around all day long just assuming the worst and not being able to trust anyone. So like as a society, we just have to assume that we can trust the people we're working with so we can collaborate and build and do partnerships and lots of great things that we probably talk about at conferences like Elevate around collaboration and doing these things. But how do we have that trust in the digital world that we are now operating in more and more? And so that's the conversation that we want to have today, is how do we bridge that gap? How do we build new ways to verify and build trust in this online environment? One, to give ourselves some tools to fight that epidemic of fraud. And how can that be the lever that actually allows us to drive growth? So we talk about innovation and growth a lot at Elevate, and this is hopefully conversation that talks about, okay, what are some of the things that we can do tangibly in Canada to do that? And the numbers speak for themselves. So in Canada, fraud losses from scams, 569 million, but only 5 to 10% of people are reporting. So what does that mean? It means that the real number and the cost of fraud is somewhere between probably $6 billion to $11 billion a year. So it's impacting us. The underreporting is actually not unique, but we are disproportionately impacted here in Canada compared to other countries. And we're missing the fundamental tools to be able to fight against fraud. And as was just mentioned on the intro, at Elevate, we're showing demonstrations of how easily you can take someone's identity, create a deep fake, and all of a sudden you can instantly start exploiting that and have any number of ways where you can create new fraud scenarios and scams. And that's costing all of us. and becomes a real barrier and obstacle for us as a community to drive innovation growth if we don't have that ability to have that kind of core trust that can underpin the ecosystem. So in addition to fighting fraud, we also need this kind of core identity function really to be an enabler, and without it, we can't realize the benefits of this new technology growth that we are hoping will kind of drive us forward as Canada and as a tech ecosystem and fintech in particular. You know, we're all familiar with Zoom, especially post-pandemic, or Teams, Google Meets, whatever you want to use, and it allows us to be so much more productive. It allows us to interact online in ways we couldn't before and don't have to travel. Or when we do have to travel, we just use Uber. And it wasn't that long ago when the idea of pressing a button on your phone and jumping in a stranger's car would seem kind of far-fetched. But now it's just totally second nature. And we are able to do that because we have some faith that Uber's done what they need to do, and they can trust us as, you know, having our driver profile, and we can trust the driver. But you know, Uber's announcing that they're launching investigations into fake driver profiles and people getting charged for rides that they never took. And so you can see how, even though it's a small example, it doesn't take a lot to, you know, erode the trust or really kind of introduce a lot of friction into a system. And so as we look to make progress, drive innovation, kind of really be able to harness the strength of the technologies and a lot of things we're talking about, you know, on stages like this at Elevate, we need to have those fundamentals in place. And that starts with just that kind of core concept online. Can I verify that I really am like a human as a start? Maybe, you know, I'm not a Russian bot. I'm a person. I'll continue the dog theme. And it builds. So as we go into more high-stakes transactions, we need to then build out ways to verify identity or attributes about people in a way that can facilitate those increasingly high-stakes transactions. So as we're continuing to move into a world where we're building for digital-first experiences, and we talk about concepts like embedded financing or open banking, payments modernization, you know, these are near and dear concepts for me. Our teams at Interac are working on these things. And I think we have an opportunity as Canada to really build out new capabilities that are bringing fintechs into market, driving competition, new services for consumers. And underpinning that, we have this need to also build the tools and the framework in place that allow us to also do the element which is required for me as an individual, as a consumer, or as a business, to be able to have that exchange and trust when transacting in this digital world. So I want to talk a bit about what that looks like, try and make this a little tangible, and what that would mean for the market in Canada. And so there's a few concepts, a few principles that we believe is required for that to become a reality. So firstly, we need to think a bit differently about how we share our identity and what needs to be shared. So conventionally, if I need to prove that I am who I am, I'm going to a bar. I don't really get ID'd much anymore, but if I did, I would pull out a piece of plastic, but I don't need to show my name, address, date of birth, all that information that's there. All I need to show is I'm over 19. So in a digital world, we need to have a system that can contextually share the right information. So it might just be, hey, I'm a human, and I need access, and I don't want to have to click some squares to say this is a motorcycle or bridge. There should be a better way to do that. It might need to be, hey, this is me. I have a job. I make a certain amount of money, and I'd like you to lend me a bunch of money to buy a house, whatever that may be, and doing it in a better way that doesn't require photocopying some pay stubs. So that contextual nature is important, and it references a different element, which is it should recognize the fact that we are operating in a connected ecosystem. So I already have all of this data linked to me somewhere already. I have a phone in my pocket that has a phone number attached to me with my name, probably my address. A bank has already done their due diligence and KYC that said, this is really Giles, and he has this name, address, date of birth. I graduated from a university. They have some information that could vouch that I am who I am, and I've got some credentials. We don't want to build a new central repository for all this lives and create a honeypot of data that's just now a new vulnerability. What we really want is the ability to just connect that data, give consumers the ability, with their consent and control, of course, put that in their hands so they can connect the data that's already there and facilitate those transactions. This is sometimes called networked identity. This is an area that Interac is working with a number of partners, collaborating with fintechs, financial institutions, government, and kind of leveraging our role as a network within the Canadian environment, and even the concept of networks to plug this together and facilitate these transactions and a new way of operating online. And I think that's maybe the third principle, which is that collaboration model is key in Canada. This really does need to be a collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. I think there's an opportunity to build this for Canada within the Canadian context. There's lots of scenarios where my Apple ID or Google ID serves perfectly well, but as we go into high stakes transactions or exchanging sensitive data, healthcare is an example, high value financial transactions, we may not want to outsource that to an international tech company, especially ones that may have business models based on monetizing our personal data. So I think there's this opportunity to drive collaboration at an ecosystem level in Canada, build that partnership across the public and private sector, and that addresses that kind of fraud issue that we know we need to tackle head on, because otherwise that's going to stifle our growth. And it presents effectively that kind of underpinning, or as we're calling a lever, that allows us to drive the growth and realize the true potential of these new technologies. So I was reading an article, actually it just came out on Monday, and the title of the article was Canada's economy growth falls behind the US. And the concept was basically the US growth is rising post-pandemic, ours isn't gaining as fast. The stat they gave was like kind of income per person. We used to be hovering around 80% of the US, now we're down to 70 according to the IMF. So to kind of put that in perspective, we used to be on par with like the 10th poorest state in America, like Montana, something like that. And now we're trailing a little bit behind the 4th poorest, which is Alabama. So how do we drive growth? And I'm not saying I've got the silver bullet to fix the growth in the Canadian economy, but I think a theme we're hearing a lot at Elevate is that one of the ways we need to do this as an economy, as a country, as a society, is to really foster innovation and drive growth. And we're contrasting that with this fraud epidemic, and we need to look at those tools, the framework, the infrastructure that we need to underpin that, and this concept of creating new model for identity that's purpose-built for the digital ecosystem is one of those prerequisites for us to be able to take advantage of that. AI is a hot topic that I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot these few days. And we're all, I think, starting to get used to that shortcut and the efficiency that like GPT gives us. It's a shortcut. I don't actually want to go and do all the research and the laborious tasks. I want a shortcut to do it faster. We need that same type of shortcut for how we transact and interact online. I don't want to go into a physical office or branch or location and fill out a bunch of paperwork and look someone in the eyes and take half a day off work. I want a shortcut. I still want the same result. I still want to be able to perform and actually maybe do things that I couldn't do before, higher stakes transactions, but it needs to be faster, and that's where this comes into place. So we need to start asking ourselves why. Why is the best in class methods for us to buy a car, buy a house, send money, require us to put wet ink on paper just so it can be passed on and somehow photocopy a signature that probably changes every time we use it anyways. We know there are better ways to do this. The technologies are out there, and we're starting to see these rolled out already, and especially if we compare to other markets. So, I think what we want to do as a community, and especially from a fintech perspective, really commit to trying to make that better future a reality in the Canadian market. So as we're thinking about building new technologies as tech companies, as fintechs, the financial institutions, as we're delivering new services, government agencies that are looking to bring this together or even just figure out how they can foster this innovation, I think it's important that we understand some of these underpinning elements and drive that collaboration so we can drive the true potential of that technology and build that digital trust for our ecosystem. Thank you.